Genres are undoubtedly a useful way of codifying media, with each label allowing potential customers to understand the kind of experience that they're going to have with a particular product. I, for instance, absolutely suck at RTS games, and as such will avoid them at all costs unless I fancy a night of crying in my room. This is a plus, however, it also means that when a game shifts genres on the player, it always comes as something of a shock, one that sometimes can sour someone on the very thing that they're playing, or transform it from a good time into a great one. With that in mind then, I'm Josh from WhatCulture.com, and these are the 10 weirdest genre shifts in video games. Number 10, Brutal Legend. Starting off, we have one of the most infamous genre shifts in gaming history. See, Brutal Legend was marketed as a more metal God of War, a hack-and-slash extravaganza of melee brawls, open-world exploration, and the most head-banging soundtrack in gaming history. And to be fair, it did have all of those things for the first few hours. Having spent the game's opening act gathering the forces of good to battle the evil General Lionwhite, players were stunned to realize that they wouldn't just control protagonist Eddie Riggs throughout the fight, but rather they had to build structures, guide units, and control the Jack Black-voiced hero as well. And this was such a surprise that Brutal Legend's transition from brawl-heavy action-adventure to real-time strategy game was not well received by the gaming public, who felt that they had been duped by the game's advertising and the action-heavy opening hours. Developer Tim Schafer would later admit in an interview with Eurogamer that Vivendi, the game's publishers at the time, refused to advertise the game as an RTS as they feared that it would hurt sales. And given Brutal Legend's notoriously poor performance at retail, it's safe to say that they would have been better off letting gamers know what they were actually getting from the start. Number 9, Marvel's Spider-Man. Spider-Man's transitions into the stealth genre were an irritating fly that should never have made it into the spider's web. To be clear, we're not talking about the missions where Spider-Man himself sneaks around enemy strongholds and introduces nameless goons to the joys of post-concussive syndrome. No, these are the moments where the designers thought, you know what would really sell the Spider-Man fantasy? Well, what if we had players squat through levels as his non-superpowered friends? And those levels starring Spidey's less-than-super-pals were the undisputed lowlights of Insomniac's otherwise excellent game. Aggravating, slow-paced, and chock-full of insta-fail scenarios, these stealth-based excursions were a major pain in the ass and made playing as otherwise likable characters absolutely infuriating. Given the conspicuous lack of these kind of stealth missions in Spider-Man Miles Morales as well, it would seem that the developers themselves realized that some genres shouldn't be mixed. Number 8, God of War 3. Man, Guitar Hero really was everywhere in the noughties. Harmonix's peripheral-based powerhouse was a staple of gamers' living rooms during the series' late 2000s boom, and its rhythm-based, button-matching gameplay was equally prevalent in the software of the time. Case in point, God of War 3's bizarre lyre-plucking interlude. One of the oddest scenes in Sony's trilogy closing epic sees a maniac Kratos take a break from culling Olympians to showcase his classical instrument chops. Yes, in a game that sees its protagonist disembowel a titan from the inside out, literally rip the head off the god of the sun, and bonk the goddess of love via QuickTime event, the sight of Kratos strumming away on a lyre still manages to stand out as one of its weirdest moments. Tapping the PS3 controller's face buttons to the rhythm was a bizarre departure from the typical God of War formula, and thankfully one that only lasted a couple of minutes. Even then though, the brevity of God of War 3's Guitar Hero tribute makes us question why it was ever included in the first place. Hell, who knows? Maybe someone at Sony lost a bet with someone from Harmonix? I have no idea. Number 7, Saints Row 4. As has been discussed on this channel before, Saints Row 4 is a superlatively weird game. A game that blends hyperkinetic superpowers, heartwarming camaraderie, and Keith David into a ballistic cocktail of pure video game magic. You can sense the designer's sheer love for video games shining through each ridiculous scenario as well, and nowhere is that love more evident than in the Saints of Rage. Its 16-bit homage to Sega's legendary beat-em-up series, Saints of Rage sees your protagonist engage in a side-scrolling beat-em-up to rescue their best friend from an alien mind prison. The end result is honestly pretty basic, even for a beat-em-up, but the designer's passion for the genre carries the segment. The tinny sound bites, flashing gore sign, and even the colour of the health bars show a clear love for the classics of the beat-em-up genre, making Saints of Rage a heartwarming trip down memory lane. Number 6, Bayonetta. A twofer here, as Bayonetta sees Platinum's eponymous heroine take part in not one, but 2 vehicular excursions in her debut adventure. Much like the aforementioned Saints of Rage, Bayonetta's genre shifts are an elongated tribute to Sega's 16-bit golden age. In this case, the games being paid homage to are arcade classics Space Harrier and Super Hang-On. And yes, these are very deliberate tributes, as the Space Harrier section in particular even includes a banger remixed version of that game's theme. Now, some of you may be wondering why these particular genre shifts made this list. After all, vehicle sections have been part of the character action / spectacle fighter genre since Devil May Cry culminated in a plane ride through the underworld. What makes Bayonettas stand out though is that they're just so bloody long. What should have been short and sweet tributes to Sega's arcade glories are let down by ludicrously lengthy runtimes that see Bayonetta's dedication to excess work against it. Similar sections in Bayonetta sequels were far shorter and far better for it. Number 5, Nier Replicant. You couldn't have a list like this without Nier. Nier became a cult classic for many reasons: its eclectic cast, its tragic story, its willingness to delete your saved games, and also because of its maverick attitude towards genre. While ostensibly an open-world adventure, Nier shamelessly flirts with other game types during its runtime. Emil's Mansion is an homage to PS1-era survival horror, and there are numerous instances where the game becomes a bullet hell shooter. For our money though, the most outlandish genre shift occurs in the Forest of Myth. While exploring the forest, Nier and his companion Vice catch the Death Dream virus. The virus is an illness that traps people in a seemingly endless dream, which takes the form of an 80s-style text adventure. To escape the dream, the two characters have to follow the adventure to the very end, and excellently, the game fully commits to the bit, with old-school logic puzzles being solved and movement that's restricted to choosing which ordinal direction to go in. It's a brief sequence, sure, but it's a hugely enjoyable one, especially for those of you out there old enough to remember fumbling around in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Number 4, Batman Arkham Asylum. And speaking of old age, how the hell has it been 13 years since Arkham Asylum? Rocksteady's debut Batman adventure was a revelation upon its release. An unashamedly big-budget license game, Arkham Asylum infused a deep love of the Batman mythos with groundbreaking combat and exquisite environmental design. It also wasn't afraid to take risks, as seen in its delightfully creepy scarecrow sections. Throughout the game, Batman's terror-obsessed nemesis would appear and douse our hero with fear gas, resulting in a trip into Batman's own psyche. These sections transformed the game from a 3D Metroidvania to a linear horror game, where Batman was forced to hide from suddenly gigantic supervillains while searching for a way to drive Scarecrow from his mind. These sections may feel simplistic by today's standards, but back in the Xbox 360 and PS3 era, it was a genuine delight to see a studio go fully weird with a big-name property like Batman. And hopefully, Rocksteady's upcoming Suicide Squad game will take its cue from Arkham and embrace the madness. Number 3, Inscription. Now, the best thing about Inscription is that it has plenty of tricks up its sleeve, so fair warning, I'm going to have to spoil pretty much every part of it to talk about it in the context of this article. I really want you to try it for yourself, but if you have no interest, here's what the crack is. Inscription is a deck builder roguelike that sees the player being taken captive by a mysterious entity. This entity has locked you in a cabin and is forcing you to play a twisted card game, with the aim being to eventually get good enough and beat him. This is how the game starts, but it quickly becomes apparent that there's more going on than meets the eye, as various puzzles across the cabin and even talking cards that join your deck hint at wider mysteries afoot. And so when you finally beat this guy, known as Leshy, and take his picture, you get the game's first big twist, that you're actually playing a game within a game devised by Leshy himself, who has taken over the code and modeled it after his own desires. After this, you're introduced to his fellow kin, other entities who exist within the game world and want to take control of Inscryption themselves. They each have their own slightly different view on the rules and conventions of what Inscryption should be, and as a result, the second act of the title is spent in a top-down RPG card game that isn't a roguelike, but closer to something like Pokemon or even classic Zelda. In Act 3, there's a shift once again as the game goes electric, focusing on robotic cards and enemies with Dark Souls-like waypoints taking the place of regular checkpoints. These shifts keep you guessing and make Inscryption unlike almost everything else. And there's even a secret layer that I didn't spoil here because, come on, I didn't want to give everything away. Number 2, What Remains of EDITH FINCH. Giant Sparrow's excellent What Remains of EDITH FINCH sees the player living through the last moment of Edith's cursed family. Each family member is doomed to die early, with the deaths ranging from the mundane, accidentally falling off a cliff, to the outright ridiculous, being eaten by a sea monster, but the standout demise belongs to Edith's brother Lewis. Lewis's section of the game sees the player guiding the elder Finch brother through his job at the cannery, repetitively sticking fish heads in a slicer and chucking the bodies away for processing. To escape the drudgery of his daily life, Lewis retreats into a fantasy realm, which the player simultaneously guides him through via old-school choose-your-own-adventure gameplay, while also juggling his real-world job at the cannery. It's a beautifully executed scene as Lewis's fantasy world gradually grows in size until it encompasses the entire screen. As Lewis's fantasy life reaches its apex, his attachment to the real world completely breaks down, resulting in Lewis placing his head in the fish slicer while imagining being crowned in his fantasy kingdom. Lewis's story is all the sadder for its relatability. I mean, many of us have felt the soul-crushing drudgery of working a dead-end job, and his fate is a poignant reminder of the necessity of asking for help instead of retreating from the real world when times get tough. Number 1, Sonic Frontiers. Okay, now, that last entry got a little bit heavy, didn't it? Well, fortunately, we're finishing this list off with Sonic the Hedgehog, Sega's a light-hearted dude with a tood. And surely his latest merry escapade will lift our spirits, right? Well, perhaps not. And that's because Sonic Frontiers sees the speedster battling an eldritch god known only as the End, who has spent countless eons wiping out all life in the universe. Even more bizarre is the actual fight with the boss itself. Instead of the supersonic beatdowns of the previous boss battles, the End is fought via a blatant Ikaruga ripoff. Treasure's seminal shooter is a classic of the genre, but we certainly didn't expect to see its revival take place in a Sonic game. But we will certainly give Frontiers' designers credit. It makes sense that a being from beyond reality would warp the very genre of the game it was in, but please, Sega, next time, just keep Sonic on the ground where he belongs. So that's our list. I want to know what you guys think down in the comments below. What did you think of these genre shifts? And are there any interesting ones I missed off here? Let me know, and while you're down there, if you could, please give us a like, share, subscribe, and head over to WhatCulture.com for more lists and news like this every single day. Even if you don't though, I've been Josh, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you soon.